for the sake of introductions, just to show who we've got in the room, we've got an absolute treat for you now. We have got three fantastic leaders in the room who have got loads to share. So we've got Claire Campbell, who's founder of Prickly Thistle. She'll tell you more about her business now, but she's creating incredible community impact in the world. We're thrilled to have her here. We've got Stephen Sweeney, who is CEO of VASLAN, which is a Variety Action for South Lanarkshire. He also wears a hat of Chair of Children in Scotland, and he's on the board of Sport Scotland too. So from the other side, what's it like to work with a business and create good impact in the world? And then we've got Sarah Morton, who's director and founder of Matter of Focus, helping her customers to demonstrate and create more impact in the world through their customers. And she's also on the board of Women's Aid. There we go. I can't read my own scribbles. So three fantastic people with lots to learn. We are hoping this panel is going to help to educate you on what things you could do, inspire you to take more positive action in your business, and hopefully give you some really good practical tips as where to start and perhaps learn from some of the missteps of our panel. So I'm going to stop my sharing and we're going to get some faces up. Hopefully. And we've got the speakers there. So I've got a few questions for the panel. If you guys have some questions, do pop them in the chat and we'll see if we can get to them at the end. I'm sure you have lots of good questions for our speakers. I've got a few questions. If I can go round you all and maybe take a couple of minutes each. So question one, in a nutshell, what's your business in a nutshell and what's your why? Sarah, can I start with you?
Sure, thank you. So me and my co-founder Ailsa set up our business in 2017. We help charities and public sector organizations track their impact. And I mean, the reason we did it was we'd actually spent most of our working lives in the public sector or charities. And then we'd been working together in the university and we developed this approach to understanding impact where it's really difficult to understand. So it's fine if you invent cures to cancer, you say how many people you cured, but if you're supporting people's mental health or well-being in different ways, so much harder to really demonstrate what difference you make. And we developed a method, and then we decided as two middle-aged women we were going to have a tech platform to go with our method. So that's why we set up Matter of Focus. So we took a leap from, we were working at the university at that time, into being business owners. So I suppose what we really care about is that organizations in the public sector and charities who are really trying to do a hard job, they often don't get the support they need. They need to understand their own impact so that they can create the best value they can for the people they work with, but also they're very poorly served by the tech sector. The tech sector, a lot of the tech that is offered to kind of human services was originally designed for the private sector, and then it's sort of hacked to fit the public sector or charities, and it's really not right. It doesn't reflect their values. It doesn't kind of embed what matters to them. So we're very much keen on those sectors getting better tech. So that's part of our why, and also helping them really use evidence well to do the best job they can.
That's great. And that's definitely touching on what we've been chatting about in terms of measuring impact. So I'm sure there'll be some questions around that. Steve, as you're unmuted currently, do you want to tell me a little bit about what you're up to in the world and what's your why?
Sure, yeah, no, thanks very much for having me along. Hopefully contributions are useful in some way. So as you mentioned, I've got a few different hats. So I'm a chief executive of VASLAN, which is the third sector interface in South Lanarkshire, but there's an equivalent across Scotland, and in other parts of the UK there's an equivalent CVS type organisation. Really, it's a single point of access for support and advice for and with about the third sector. And I guess, what is the third sector? Well, it's volunteers and volunteering, community organisations, social enterprises, and probably a wee nod to the little guys and organisations that are invisible and you probably don't know about, that are within a couple of miles of your offices. I'm the chair of Children Scotland, which is the national membership organisation for children's charities in Scotland, where there's a kind of clear vision to make sure that all children, or mission, sorry, to make sure all children have got an equal chance to flourish in the country. And I'm on the board at Sport Scotland as well, the national agency for sport. So I guess what's my why, and why do I contribute to these different things? Well, similar, slightly different to some of you potentially. It's really about the most vulnerable people in our communities, and been a wee bit angry with the world that everybody gets a fair crack. You look at the levels of child poverty, You look at how people with disabilities are fairly treated, people who are carers, people from a range of different protected characteristics as a society. It's just not good enough. So a bit angry with the world, a bit angry with the UK, a bit angry with everything in Scotland, and keen to just play a little part to give folk a wee bit of a hand up as opposed to a hand out.
Love that. Putting that anger to good use. I'm sure some other people can do that too. Claire, what about you?
Hi there. Thank you all for having me, and good morning to everyone. Zooming from a very unusual location first for me, but I will give a prize to the person who can guess where am I. But yeah, so like Stephen, angry, absolutely frustrated, and rebellion is what we're about. So yeah, so I'm the founder of Prickly Thistle. And yeah, so really, we're all wearing clothes, we're all wearing textiles. The journey started slightly differently, but actually I've become completely sort of accidentally obsessed person about the fabric of the planet. And this is through what we wear. I did not realise that bringing back weaving to the Highlands of Scotland and looking at tartan would be this absolute Alice in Wonderland, collapsed down many, many holes. But yeah, I mean, clothing is something that is so fundamental to our existence, along with food and shelter. So cut a long story short, we've become aware that actually most of what we're wearing is made of oil. So we know we've got this big kind of conversation around how we actually have less fossil fuels in our lives. So 70% of what we wear is made of oil. Up to 8,000 chemicals can be on our clothes next to our skin, which is the biggest organ in our body, and lots of unproven safety associated with that. So modern slavery in terms of where our clothes come from, and we've got a huge issue with waste colonisation in terms of how much textiles are exported from the Western world to the global south. So what we do at Prickly Thistle is that we manufacture our own fabrics in a slow, as close to home as possible way, using amazing ancient looms. So I'm very much fighting some of the industry 4.0 SMAS innovative way of doing things, because I think we need to, as Stephen quite rightly pointed out about social equity and a fairer distribution of wealth, we need to create more jobs for people. It's not about robots doing everything because that's super clever. It's not really super clever because there's social injustice as well as climate injustice really staring us down the road. So yes, we weave our own fabrics and we make our own clothes. We make our own clothes in a way that is zero in terms of fabric waste, forever to be repurposed, so the circular economy. And that's a very simple way of making garments through our legal system, which is modules. But yeah, we've become quite rebellious. So the narrative and the stereotype that everyone can think of tartan for Scotland as an icon, forget all the tat images that are coming to your mind. We're absolutely about empowering people through our community, and this is the why of where we are today, is about letting people make informed decisions. We get to make informed decisions about the food that we put in our bodies, but we do not understand how much we're absorbing and eating through our skin, or the textiles in our home, or, for example, the national health sheets that are currently 50% polyester, which people don't know, and we haven't got the health research to prove that that is absolutely okay. And when you start looking at some of the chemicals, you know there's connections to cancer with some of that. So our why is about giving people the opportunity to make an informed decision, but also really radically campaigning for a different look on for-profit organisations. So we're a limited company. So campaigning and speaking with Scottish Government and thinking about how less is more. How do you cap the size of businesses? How do you really look at the distribution of wealth inside a business? Who is the lowest paid? Who is the highest paid? And then really seeing industries rising up from a fairer distribution. So lots of small companies, the whole agenda of where you need to get bigger, get scale, get investment so you can be the biggest in the market, I feel is a fundamental flaw with where we are today. So we want to prove that you can be a very, very small business, but you can have massive impact. So that's what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Claire. Right. So leading on from that, and some of you have already hinted, but how does your business, your organization create value in the world? And today is all about creating value for your customers and for the community. We've focused on employees a bit. We've focused on your governance and strategy. So in terms of creating value either for your customers or for the wider community, and by that I mean suppliers, the local community, global advocacy groups, perhaps. I'll start with you again, Sarah.
Yeah, so I think in terms of our customers, ultimately we're really helping them to be more efficient and more effective and also more attractive to funders. So they're able to really make the case for the work they do and keep it going so they can still carry on supporting people's health and well-being or whatever it is in the community. So that's kind of how we're creating value for them. So it's very much, you know, we're supporting people who work in these sectors to do the best job they can, make sure resources are really streamlined around what's most effective, what makes the biggest difference to people, and then really make a case so that they can keep doing that, and their funding doesn't get cut, and they focus the, you know, shrinking resources in the public sector and the third sector moment is pretty brutal out there. So really being able to show how they make a difference to people is an important part of how they maintain themselves. I think in terms of the kind of wider community, maybe what I'll specifically talk about tech, because, you know, we're a B Corp, we're a certified B Corp, and part of what you do as a certified B Corp is you look at your supply chain and who you buy from as a business. So an important part of your contribution as a business, and kind of links to what Claire was just saying, is how you place yourself in the business ecosystem and who you buy and sell to. And are you doing that in an ethical way? And are you doing it in a way that means that you're causing no harm? But even better than that, you're contributing positively to other businesses who are also contributing positively in the world. So, you know, we really try and use suppliers and have a supply chain that's really around that. But in the tech world, that is a pretty controversial thing to say. You know that tech companies are not ethical. Google may say do no harm, but they do a lot of harm. We know we have these enormous servers. Even now, as we're all talking to each other, we are causing environmental pollution because the servers that are running the computers on which we sit are sitting in the desert in Arizona being cooled by water that's being taken from a lake. You know, there's huge environmental damage going on in the tech sector. But if you even raise the question of, oh, could we buy our, you know, could we host our software on something that's not Amazon Web Services? There is not an ethical alternative to that. It just doesn't exist. So in Scotland at the moment, there's a bit of a movement to try and create a Scottish cloud, which would be carbon neutral, because it would be completely wind powered, you know, which we can do in Scotland. But at the same time, you know, in the environment and the competition are hugely environmentally damaging, massive tech structures that are very invisible to normal people and also really hard to avoid if you're trying to run any kind of tech platform. So I think that's our biggest challenge in terms of having a clean supply. I mean, we're a consultancy with tech, so all of our consultancy, you know, we buy all of our office supplies from green companies. Like, that's easy, that part of it's easy. But if every single business bought all of their office supplies from sustainable resources, that would have a massive impact. So, you know, like all the small things matter as well, but some of the bigger things are more challenging.
Well, that's great. Well, I can feel the anger in there. So like Stephen, you're using your anger to do something about it. And again, if you've got an entrepreneur here that can help solve that problem, then do get in touch. Stephen, same for you. How are you creating external value?
Thank you. So I guess from my side, coming from a slightly different perspective, it's maybe more that focus on that support to the community, and then maybe the benefits of wearing different hats. So I mean, the first point I'd probably make roundabout volunteering. You know, so certainly in Scotland, and I'm sure it'll be the same way across the UK, since COVID and since the cost crisis, formal volunteering's down about 18%. People have got less time, there's less flexibility. And that actually causes a real issue because the economic footprint of volunteering is significant. You know, the whole self-help neighbourhoods looking after themselves, families looking after each other, etc. So I'd probably pose the question around, does your business have an ESV policy? Does it have an employer-supported volunteering policy? Are you just ticking a box and going and painting a fence or painting a wall or whatever else? Are you thinking about how you can make more of a meaningful contribution? If you're partnering up with organisations, quite often the organisations who benefit are the ones with a loud voice and the nice marketing campaign, and they make it easy for you. But if you're really thinking about what sort of impact you want to have, actually, it's about the organisations who are invisible, that you don't know about, but they're probably in your postcode. And organisations like the TSIs, for example, can help you find out who they are. If you're really wanting to have a more kind of meaningful contribution to where you are locally. So I would think about volunteering in your workforce, but then also not necessarily out, you know, being an activist and contributing, but also in terms of being on boards. We often think about how do you How do you build a stronger board for yourself, your own business, and how does that help you achieve what you want to achieve? But I think that's two-way. There's real benefits in yourself and your some of your leadership or your wider workforce looking at how they can benefit from being on other boards. So I've certainly became a better employee because I've seen the other side of being on a board, and I'm a better board member as a result of seeing that from sort of both sides. So when you're looking at the kind of governance of your organisation or financial management or what's your strategy or game plan, I think you were having a chat about language earlier on in the kind of programme, you know, looking at how you perform. So ultimately, as you know, it's all about relationships, it's all about people, but seeing things from that other perspective maybe helps you navigate different situations that you've seen from different perspectives before. And I've certainly really benefited from that. And that's quite a thing within the third sector, within smaller organisations. It's quite normal for people to be involved in multiple things because they're kind of purpose driven and that's their kind of cause. So it'd be interesting. I'm sure that is visible within the business community, but I wonder whether it's something that's a wee bit untapped. And my final point, I guess I'm conscious of my time, is really thinking about children. Children, young people, your business may target them as a market or in thinking about a future workforce or future customer point of view. I'd encourage you to think about how do you climb the ladder of participation with children and young people. You know, again, do we tick a box and just share information or engage with them, or is there a way that you can move to some sort of more meaningful co-production, co-design? Because you know, young people aren't in the future; they're the here and now as well, and the value that they bring to your business might just surprise you.
Fantastic. Lots of food for thought there. And thanks, yeah, we did talk quite a lot about boards and the governance and strategy on day one. So hopefully that gives some people some food for thought who they might join in terms of a board member. Thanks, Stephen. All right, Claire, now you've already highlighted quite a lot of ways that you are providing external impact, but give us a couple of examples.
Yeah, external impacts. So for me, there's been a realization that a lot of the global challenges will be resolved with local solutions. And one thing that we're particularly proud of, and it's still ongoing, and going back to education, and I think it's going back to people, being able to make that informed decision, whether it's your IT or whether, what's happening in your community. The more information we have, the better. So we've worked and trialed with a couple of schools around school uniforms, for kids to really understand. One is a kind of subliminal kind of awareness in terms of what are these fabrics made of? Are they natural, plant, animal, or mineral? But doing it in a basis that's really around, realizing that a stereotyped sector as clothing, which is creative and, it's just fashion, and we're not a fashion brand, we make clothes. Clothes are made to protect your body. But really showing how with, right through to Education Scotland and building up some case for speaking to Scottish Government about it for legislative change in the sphere of education, but STEM learning, the principles of engineering, and showing that actually making clothes is the same as building a bridge. And if you were presenting to children today that if you had this challenge of taking a local bridge apart but you had to take it apart in a way that you didn't waste any material, you had to identify what could be reusable. You had to then scope that second bridge that you were building using materials from the older bridge because it's a different, a different footfall, a different payload, or anything like that. So they're planning out the whole engineering solution, so that you can think about that as, this is very much, STEM. This is building a bridge. We know what that's about. But somebody who can do that with textiles, take garments apart with zero waste to find a way of using them going forward, but also building in the capacity for circular economy and redesigning that for further use. There is no difference, and for me, there's very much, my background is I was a chartered accountant, recovering chartered accountant, and I've worked in that world of professionalism. And the stereotyping is really frustrating for me because actually somebody who can provide a really ethical solution, regardless of what industry they work in, they are of the same value as somebody else, and then you start thinking about pay scales and how people are paid differently, but they're providing the same sense of skills, etc., to provide that solution. So we've been working in school spaces to kind of get that through the children, so they can question parents, they can start to go home and think about, why am I wearing this, and start to kind of really sort of have a ripple effect there. So that's one thing we've been particularly sort of proud of and enjoy doing, because it's incredible how much oil kids are wearing to school and don't know about it. And the next generation, when it comes to that ethical existence in the future, sometimes you'll hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, they just don't know, they've got so much to learn, they're just buying this, that, next thing. But there's a lot of kids out there who are so principled. They are angry with the world. They can see what's happening. They are frustrated with the the incompetence in delivering, which is simple solutions, which quite often is going backwards a little bit because our obsession, I feel sometimes with innovation, has been another word for destruction. So there's some kids out there who are the future consumer, the future funder of everything in sense of economics. You know, they will absolutely only fund the businesses they believe in, and they can actually change so much. So it says that one particular project has been something that we're proud of, and showing how we can deliver that in a way that's a framework that's scalable, so that every single child in the future, we hope for Scotland being a kind of, you know, leader in the world stage, they could all be making their own school uniform. And that's, you know, that's something we want to see brought into school education under UN SDG type developments. So that's just one thing that we do.
Yeah, and I know you do loads more, and we're going to be running out of time, and I want to ask you so many more questions. So this is just a teaser. Do get in touch with Claire and learn from her business. I wonder if I might go the other way around, and I can start with you, Claire. And if everyone could keep them reasonably brief, so we've got a bit of time for questions, that'd be great. So you're providing incredible impact for your customers, for the community that you buy from, that you supply to, that's your local community. In a nutshell, what financial success have you seen off the back of that? So how has that fed your profitability, revenue growth, resilience? Like what's been the business implication of being a good business?
Yeah, I will be, excuse me. It's funny because in my prior life as an accountant, working in oil and gas, working in construction, working in professional practice, you know, there was a definite different kind of capitalistic formula applied to what I did. Now it's about actually doing the right thing. And if you're financially viable, it's not about achieving exceptional growth. So for us, I never like to talk about financial benefits, to be honest. You know, we are so proud to have become the first B Corp textiles mill in the whole of the UK. So we are the youngest, we're the smallest, we're the ones that didn't know what we were doing, we weren't trained in this space, and we've seen other major big players in this industry in Scotland also become B Corp certified, which is fantastic. So, and going back to B Corp certified, you change your articles of association where you say you put people and planet before profit. So profit's the last thing you talk about, to be honest, and it's about finding that financial viability. And it's so yeah, I think for us, I hope that it's actually allowed us to connect with people who are looking for more ethical ways of living and funding ethical businesses. But yeah, because we did that within a year of starting our business, I have no 20 years we did it this way and now we do it this, and this is the difference. We just feel really, really proud that we've always tried to champion and support local supply chains. We're also helping to build them back up because so much is missing. So in terms of, there's no, old Claire would sit there and go, we've had growth of 10%, and EBITDA is looking at this and we could think about the next investment. It's none of that.
I guess the question is, how long have you been a viable business for?
A viable business since year one.
And how many years has that been, I guess is my question.
We are coming up to 6 years.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
We don't need a counterfactual. You've been doing well for 6 years. So that's good business is good business. Yeah. Oh, I want to ask you about more questions, but I'm going to move over to Steve. Steve, what have you seen with your hats on in terms of people giving back and that creating good business outcomes too?
Sure, yeah. So I guess in terms of, not too dissimilar to Claire, in terms of the economic success, I think for local community-based organisations, for smaller organisations, whatever else, it's very much about remaining sustainable, remaining viable, and still being here to be able to deliver your purpose, and the public sector certainly seeing the squeeze as a result of the various crises, and I know there's real challenges for business, but it's almost like the third sector's, this is like normal. The current economic environment, that's just it's usual. Nothing's changed. There's no multi-year agreements, there's no inflationary uplifts, you're being asked to do more with less. This is just like the normal environment for the third sector, which feeds into the environment and the whole environment not being good enough. So in terms of social value, it's about still being here to deliver on your core purpose. And maybe one other just alternative view I would share is just that in a previous role I worked up in Aberdeen around their football club's charity. And I'll get to the point. We really brought in there really to develop a range of community impacts, kind of using the club's brand, and we used kind of various social return on investment reporting, whatever else, and ultimately that basically helped the club demonstrate a wider community impact to get a new stadium through planning. So sometimes as a business, you're maybe on your own right, you're not doing enough to justify maybe expansion plans in terms of wanting to have a new asset or expand an asset, and to get certain things through planning, you maybe need to show a wider kind of community benefit. And sometimes by having a charity or supporting other local organisations, that's a great way of doing it.
Yeah, good thought. Thanks, Stephen. And Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we're a B Corp. We sell to charities and public sector, so that's worked really well for us, because those sectors don't like, you know, they find it distasteful giving money to organizations who are just trying to maximize profit. And there's a lot of consultancies, particularly in our space, who do really maximize profit. And the other way those consultancies maximize profit is by really screwing their staff, if that's a word I'm allowed to say in this forum. So, you know, a lot of consultancies, they're full of these young people who are keen and enthusiastic, but they make them work 45-hour weeks and nothing's ever good enough. And it's a pretty brutal environment. And I suppose we really believe in creating good jobs. And one of the things you can contribute to in this space is creating good jobs. Our values include bringing your whole self to work, work-life balance being your responsibility, that if you feel like your work life is out of balance, you need to talk to someone. Like, we don't know unless you tell us. But that has massively improved our resilience in terms of recruitment and retention. So it's easy for us to recruit, and has been quite a tough recruitment environment, as many of you will know. We have not had any problems recruiting, and lots of people who we've interviewed have said, oh yeah, it was because you're a values-based business that we want to come. And the same with retention. People literally say that one of my young colleagues who started recently said, oh, I can't believe it. When someone says they're off sick, people say, oh, I hope you get better soon. Because where she worked previously, if you said you're off sick, people were like, well, who's going to do the work? And you know, made a real fuss about it. It didn't make it easy just to be off sick, for goodness sake, for a day or two. So, you know, you can do a lot of good by making good jobs where people can thrive. We spend so much of our life at work. It should be a nice experience. You should be able to use your talents. All of that, I think, is a massive contribution for this sector, and it does. Though I think those things hugely increase resilience and make you a better business. So
Massively, yeah. Thank you. And again, so many questions I could ask, but absolutely with you on the creating good jobs. Okay, bit of a speed round, and I'll start with you, Sarah. Given everything you've learned in terms of creating impact for especially for your customer and consumer, what piece of advice would you give? And hopefully you don't mind people contacting you in future for some advice, but what piece of advice would you give to the businesses here in terms of being a better sort of social business?
I mean, I get asked this quite a lot of people who want to be a B Corp, for example, and they're like, oh, we'd like to be a B Corp. And I think the thing about it is, it's got to be in your DNA. It's not a thing on the side of what you do. So you can't just, I mean, people do have corporate social responsibility arms, don't they, where they do some good, and that's a lot better than doing no good, but that's not really what it's about. So I think you've got to have leadership who really want to be in the space. And I think once you've got that, other things really flow. I would definitely say doing the B Corp assessment, even if you don't formally do it, even if you just use the tool, which I presume you've been sharing, Mahala, during these sessions. But you're about to. Okay, just using that tool as a sort of self-diagnosis of all the things you might think about, because what you might find is some of them you can really easily do, but it will help you focus on where you could do things better. But I think that taking that very holistic view of it and not thinking it's a department or a function but really trying to embed it in how you are as a business is my top tip.
Love it. Yeah, and that's why we started with governance and strategy in terms of how do you want to be a better business for the world, and we will come back to that on day 5. Thank you. Great tip. Stephen, how about you?
Yep, quick fire. If you don't have an employer-supported volunteering policy, think about getting one. Think about the two-way benefits of wearing different hats and you know, attracting different skill sets to your board, but also your workforce spending time on other boards and what that then gives back to your business. If you were wanting to do anything in terms of social impact partnerships with charities or whatever, don't just think about the big guys, think about the little guys. And there's organisations out here who can help you find out who they are, that they don't have perhaps the same reach, but maybe what they're doing is absolutely saving lives and very, very mission driven, and you know, shares values with your business. Children are the future, they're the now, so how can you involve them in some way? And to finish on a sport one, naturally, when we think about performance sport, we've got the Olympics this summer, there'll be Scottish athletes there, we've got the Euros, whatever else, there's other sports that have got great events, and we often think about that performance side. And actually, for those businesses here that are a wee bit of a scale, actually, you're out with your football, your rugby, whatever else, most national governing bodies aren't particularly well resourced. And there'll actually be really, really interesting partnerships at scale if you're wanting to tap into an audience. You get basketball in Scotland wanting to professionalise, you get netball in Scotland wanting to professionalise. There's some really interesting partnerships, I think, there for businesses. And to bear in mind, if you were wanting to support sport, it's the whole education in schools, clubs and communities, the volunteer-led stuff. Actually, that's where the performance sport people start. So support something local and give folk a wee bit of a hand up as opposed to a handout.
Love it. Lots of inspiration there. Thanks, Stephen. And finally, Claire, bring us home. What would be one tip that you could advise these businesses?
I think it's using your voice and not being frightened to ask the awkward questions. You know, whether that's in the supply chain, sharing some of your customers, the business community, to government level, because I think legislative change around a lot of the business side of things is really important. We need to see more coming from government to help create, you know, we hear a lot of rhetoric around we want to create more businesses with purpose, we want more green businesses, but we do need legislation to help stack that up. So just a quick analogy would be, it's just been on the TV recently and it's about NASA. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but there's a 3-parter that was really looking at the disaster in 2003 with I think it was the Columbia shuttle. And really that really summed up, there were so many people within inside NASA who were working within a culture who felt like they couldn't say anything. And because nobody really pushed when they saw that bit of foam that fell off that carrying vehicle that hit the wing of the shuttle, all 7 astronauts lost their life when they came back. And there were so many people who felt they wished they'd done more. You can watch it, it's incredible. But that principle of saying now's the time when we should do more. So use your voice. You know, you're not doing it to be awkward or controversial. You're coming from a place of passion. We want to make a difference. We want to make a better future for our next generation, absolutely the children. So I would say use your voice and go and watch that programme. It'll make you realise actually it's hard to speak out, but don't be frightened. There's lots of people who will then be inspired by you because you used your voice and you broke that mold. So use your voice.
Yes, love it. That's a really good inspiring one to finish on. Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers. Jordan, I'm going to look to you. Do we have any, we're a little bit over time. Do we have any questions before we say goodbye and thank you that were in the chat? I know, hand up.
No, just sort of, no, there's nothing there. People are just obviously just commenting in, just saying that it's great, or they're doing similar things as well. So there's no real set questions there. I see David's got his hand raised there. He's maybe got a question just now.
Yep. Is it okay, Mahala, to ask a question?
Yeah. We just need to let the speakers go for 11 o'clock, but you go in there with a question and then we'll go to breakouts. Yes.
Super quickly to Claire. Thanks very much, Claire, for what you said. You on the subject of awkward questions, that there are B Corp businesses in the UK and in the world who make clothes, right? So I think Patagonia are a B Corp, and there's Alpkit in the UK, and there's Rapa Nui that aren't a B Corp, but they make sustainable clothing. But a lot of the clothing that they make is made of oil, which I've never heard anybody say that before, clothing made of oil. But of course it is, because it's plastic based and it's really water resistant and all that. What do you think about these businesses that are obviously putting good practice into their business and making good products and helping their communities and the world, but using oil to make the vast majority, or at least a big part of their clothing lines?
Yeah, no, absolutely right, David, and thank you for asking. And I think, yeah, you know, there's a couple of answers there. So the likes of Patagonia, who have been trailblazing as an activist business for sure, Yvon Chouinard and what he's done, but fundamentally they're still working with fossil fuel based clothing. So what I try and say to people is that, and it's sometimes a kind of you know, is a challenge for B Corps. You get a lot of people saying, well, why have you got Coots Bank? You know, there's a few B Corps there. Why are they, you know, part of the community? We don't think they're definitely putting people and planet for profit. But when they've changed their articles of association, I say to a lot of people, consumers, you can challenge them and say, if you can still make exceptional profits from not doing the right thing by people and planet, then, you know, they've opened the door for that. But yeah, I think the whole, going back to the point again about fossil fuels and using your voice, this is where I feel legislative change is so important, and we're trying our best to really push that forward. So Scotland, unfortunately, we're no longer part of Europe, but they have a 2030 textile strategy where they will be ending all fossil fuels in their clothing. but it's closing, but it's also, as I say, going back to the NHS sheets or the amount of pollution in our home. You know, our house, there's more pollution inside our house than outside our homes because of all of the VOCs that come from all of the plastics, in terms of whether it's curtains, whether it's our furniture. You know, this is all emitting, and therefore when you have a fire, it's not the flames per se, it's the chemical black smoke that will get you first. And what do we have? Plastic fire alarms in our homes, when actually if you had more natural fibers like wool, which has actually got a flame retardancy built in with the amount of nitrogen and water in the fiber, it doesn't burn. So using your voice, absolutely. And then we try and do that through customer awareness. So having that conversation, so we see the ripple effect of people talking about it, but we're always trying to kind of push in through various bodies. Unfortunately, in Scotland, there is no textiles representative in any sense. You know, it's not just clothing, it's massive textiles. It's the seating on the buses, it's what's on the trains, it's, you know, all of the public procurement we do, it's all of the PPE, the workwear. I mean, the list is endless in terms of how much oil involved. So yeah, so it's we're trying our best to push more awareness at a government level, but yeah, I think there's more people talking about it. And I think, just to finish on that, David, one thing that I think would be really help with it, because we all know about the waste colonisation and we're starting to realise how much, you know, fossil fashion, etc. But one thing I'm really passionate about for this year is a petition for labelling in Scotland, so that actually if something's made of oil, that it very clearly says it. You know, there's an additional label to it. We shouldn't have to have all the businesses using amazing plant and animal fibres to work harder to sell the romantic notion of we're saving the planet by making clothes this way. If it's bad, stick a label on it and have a danger sign. So a petition to try and get Scotland to do that. But yeah, and also the one other piece around it is actually getting and dealing with the unproven safety, given that we've only been weighing fossil fuels since they invented tights. So I like to call it, we need to go back to BT, before tights. And if we can really get the first health study, because I've spoken to lawyers within the B Corp community from a human rights perspective to say that actually I want to know I wore fossil fuel clothes and it could have caused cancer. But they said, well, you've got no evidence, but we've no evidence to prove, you know, the other side. So there's books like Killer Clothes, there's books like Die For. So there is definitely smoke out there that something's wrong. So a petition this year for the labelling to say that this is made of oil, plastic, and also how we can get that actual first-time research, maybe with a Scottish Institute, you know, education organisation, to look at what is the implications of wearing oil, going to the gym. Chris Hoy, you know, super healthy guy. Cancer,
we got some calls to action for people there. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to stop you there to respect people's time, because I know you only put 10 till 11 in your diary. We could have this conversation all day. And I hope you don't mind that we can share your businesses in our LinkedIn group, and people can get inspired by what you're up to and perhaps get in touch. If they have more questions, we have lots more questions. Can I massively thank you guys for sharing your time and your experience today? I hope you've inspired lots of sparks that will take an action. We'd love to come back to you and tell you about the longer term outcomes of you coming here today. So that's our promise to you. So if everyone can just thank the speakers, and we'll let you get on with your merry day.